I'm Rabbi Jay Karzan,
And I'm Rabbanit Ruby Ray Karzan.
and Tape with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug. Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. My guest today is Sherwin Pomerantz. Welcome, Baruch haba. Welcome to the show. I've known Sherwin since I was about 5 years old or 6 years old. I've known him forever.
That was only 4 years ago.
Our families were friends since I was young, but Sherwin is an amazing person. He's the former vice president of Luz Industries in Israel. He's lived in Israel now, moving from the Maine Township, Des Plaines area, where we both lived when I was growing up, to Israel about 35 years ago.
35 years.
35 years
last
ago.
Week.
He was a developer of the 354 MW solar electric generating power in Southern California, an amazing thing, and traveled from Israel to California on a regular basis for business for many years. He had senior management responsibilities, public relations, international relations. He did all this stuff. He's the former president of Controls for Industry Incorporated, which when I was a teenager at about 16 or 17 years old, I used to deliver his computer programs that he ran, which was a payroll mainly. But the interesting thing about that was you had the biggest computer I ever saw in my life at the time because we didn't have computers. There were no PCs.
Nobody
no
had
private
them.
computers. You had this gigantic computer. You were the first person I ever knew that actually had a computer system in a business
A room
or
full.
a
A room full of equipment.
It was gigantic, but it's in my memory, and it kind of, when people say, what were computers like in the 1970s, in the early 1970s, mid-1970s, I remember Controls for Industry. He graduated with an engineering degree from NYU and went to the University of Illinois for his MS in mechanical engineering. He is the founder of E.D.I 26 years ago. His company is an amazing company also. He has interests in the Middle East, in a number of states, including Illinois, Indiana, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Delaware, in Canada as well, in Ontario. He also consults with the Virginia Economic Development Corporation and has invested in with investment with Hong Kong and Israel as well. It's an amazing thing. He is both living in Jerusalem and travels a lot, but is based there. He's done so many things in his business ventures. He's the founder and present co-chair of IBG Global, an association of companies similar to E.D.I, located in 22 world capitals and in 55 world markets. It's really an amazing thing. He was the Israel representative to the U.S. Department of State's Global Business Conference in Washington. He's been involved in non-public activities in Israel. He is the president of a synagogue in Jerusalem, Beit Knesset Ohel Nechama, a 180 family modern Orthodox synagogue. And he is the board chair of Pardes Institute, which is a co-ed yeshiva seminary in Israel. He's the national former president of the Association of Americans and Canadians in Israel, which I've mentioned and had on the show another president.
You did.
The Rabbi Jay and Ruby Karzan also have held that position. Actually, I learned of that organization from you originally. He has blogs that he writes all the time. He is I would call an expert on Israel politics because he really knows what's going on. And if you are a reader of his blogs, you find out what's going on also, which really is something that I also learned so much from. He was the president of the Board of Jewish Education in Metropolitan Chicago when he was here. He was the national vice president of United Synagogue. He was the president of Allied Jewish School Board and former president of Maine Township Jewish Congregation, where we grew up. He was originally married to Barbara, his wife, Barbara Ashbaum, who came from Kansas City, who I'm friends with her siblings over the years and their spouses. His life now with his current family and his children and his grandchildren, so many, and really it's an amazing thing. His wife Shani and he together have a number of children, grandchildren, and they are really quite the Israeli family who still have strong connections to the United States and travel so much. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show. So I talked about this little biography, but let me talk about you, because I grew up as I was a young, not long before being a rabbi, a religious young man, becoming more religious and growing up. You know, I grew up in your house. I spent Passover Seder in your house, Shabbat meals, right. Growing up being friendly with your children who are a little bit younger than me, went through tragedies with you, went through simchas, happy occasions with you, and here you've become so successful in your field. How does one move from data entry? I'm serious. How does one move from data entry and doing payroll to this gigantic industry that you're involved in?
Look, what happens is when you go to Israel, Israel is very fixated and has been very fixated on degrees. So it doesn't matter what you've been doing or what your interest is. Generally, they will say, "Oh, but you are an engineer," and actually. That's how I got that job with the solar company. You're an engineer, so we need an engineer. And I said to them, but I really never practiced. They said, don't worry about it. And if you recall, there was somebody here, a rabbi here by the name of Samuel Schaffler. Sure. He was a bit of a mentor of mine. He was the executive director of the Board of Jewish Education. And I called him and I said, do I take this job? I'm not really. He said, take it, just get started. And it turned out that within a year, I was general manager of the company, and then I moved over to vice president of administration. And then when they went out of business, which was 26 years ago, then what do you do? You know, I wasn't a kid even by that point, and I said, do I really want to work for somebody else? I said, you know what? I took a few of us who were in the company, who we knew each other well, and I said, look, let's start a business. I don't know what we're going to do. But we had me, and we had a guy who was an expert in marketing and a strategic planner and a finance guy, and we were lucky. Very frankly, early 1990s, Israel had very, very little foreign direct investment coming into the country. And
different from today.
Very different. But they knew they had to change that. So the Ministry of Economy gave $1 million, they thought it was a lot of money, $1 million contract to a company in America called Hill & Knowlton. And Hill & Knowlton needed somebody in Israel to feed them information. So we had been doing some volunteer work for the ministry, and the ministry said to us, listen, you guys, you know, your Luz is closed down. Why don't you start a company and we'll recommend you? And that's what they did. And so we started the business with a significant client. Initially, it was Hill & Knowlton, then later it was a Chicago firm, the Edelman organization here. And for 20 years, we supplied them with data about Israel, and of course, that whole system grew. Concurrently with that, U.S. states started looking to establish outposts in Israel to assist companies here to do business there. And we got California initially as a client, and I said, wow, this is really a business. You could really do a lot more with this. And I just started going state to state, talked with every Secretary of Commerce I could get an appointment with, and that became a significant business line for us. And interestingly enough, to your listeners, we do that not just in Israel. The states that we represent, including Illinois, we cover the entire region from Turkey out to Dubai and everything in between. So 2 weeks ago, we had 9 Illinois companies in Dubai for the Arab Health Show. Wow. We made 140 advance appointments for them. Next week, we've got a group coming in, a food company from Brazil, that hired us to make appointments for the Gulf Food Show in Dubai. So this is the kind of stuff we do. It's sort of not the kind of thing you get trained for. None of the people that work with me or had worked for me were ever trained in this area. We find that teachers and history majors are really good at this because of the way they look at issues and problems and how they deal with people. Our trade director is a history major from McGill, and he's got an incredible memory and very good at languages. So this is how you build that kind of a business. We branched out. We're doing a lot more work now out of the United States. Last year we did 2 missions from the Ukraine into Israel. We did 3 or 4 from Germany. And the Hong Kong issue is actually attracting Israeli investment into Hong Kong.
How interesting.
And so they have 27 offices around the world.
So many countries, so many cities around the world.
A lot of interest.
Let me ask you this about, so your Hebrew was mediocre, you spoke Hebrew, but not like an Israeli when you moved to Israel. To go into business, you would think your Hebrew has to be absolutely, bidiyuk, perfect, and you have to be able to speak Hebrew very, very fluently because there's business terms and business ideas. And did Ulpan, learning Hebrew in Ulpan, do that for you when you moved there? Or was this a slow process? How were you able to deal with Israeli businesses as you got into this field when your Hebrew was not in the same realm as theirs?
Well, first of all, I thank you for the compliment. I wouldn't say that my Hebrew was mediocre even. When I moved to Israel, like everybody else, I could read Hebrew from a Siddur, but most of the time I had no idea what I was saying. And I remember being in Ulpan and they came up with the word Evan for stone, and I yelled out, Evan Masu Abonim Hayatal Rosh Pina, and the teacher says to me, now you'll understand what you were saying. She's right. So my Hebrew, after 35 years, is passable. It's still not at the level of an Israeli.
By the way, that was from Psalms from Hallel.
Yeah, from Hallel. Never, it isn't anywhere near that. Americans generally are not very good at languages. But first of all, almost all of the communication in the business world is done in English. And so if I have to have a Hebrew conversation, I actually write better in Hebrew than I do speaking, because then I have time to think about it. So I put out the bulletin for the synagogue every week in French, Hebrew, and English. That I can do that's not a problem. Speaking, sometimes you don't think fast enough.
Right.
Okay? But you can get along, and in the Arab world, everybody in the business world speaks English. Everybody.
Very, very interesting.
Okay.
I want to shoot over to your blogs and your comments on politics. You're not a mainstream. You definitely have your own opinion and often opposite of the government, opposite of what the mainstream is saying and doing. And tell me about what do you think of the Netanyahu government right now? What do you think about the possible indictments that he might have to face? What do you think will happen with the new elections that are going to go on? And by the way, I just heard, as most people know, I'm involved in APEC. And at an APEC conference just this past week that I was at, I heard from someone who said Netanyahu will win. It's almost for sure, even though there is the general who's running against him is a good opponent. He still is not good enough of an opponent. But tell me what you think about these things and where are we going in the future with the state of Israel in as far as politics?
Look, there's really so much to say because the situation is so complicated and has so many roots. I think whoever said that Netanyahu will get elected again is probably right, in spite of the fact that probably 70% of the population of Israel would like to see a different prime minister. The fact is people have a lot of faith in his security ability, and that's what people worry about most.
Sure.
He's
the most dynamic speaker.
Yeah,
and also he can woo people.
Right, and he speaks good American English and all of the rest of it. Having said that, there are a lot of complaints. I mean, there are a lot of issues in addition to the potential indictments. There are people who feel that he made a major mistake in handling too many portfolios on his own. A country like Israel really needs a separate foreign minister, and we haven't had one. Communications minister. I mean, he's got 3 or 4 titles besides prime minister. It's just impossible to do that. The indictment issue is a serious one. Unfortunately, we've had a history of senior political leaders being indicted and sent to prison. Having said all of that, his strength is in finance. All right, that's his strength. About 10, 12 years ago, Forbes magazine wanted to interview him. We were still involved with the ministry at that time, so I got to be in the room. It's more than 10, 12. That was his first go-round as prime minister.
Okay.
And so there were
before he had the break in between.
Right. So there were 4 or 5 of us.
I had him on my TV show during that break.
you?
That was the first time I had him on my show.
Yeah.
I've had him on a number of times before, but that was the first time.
Yeah, so there were 4 or 5 of us in the room, and I remember going home and saying to my wife, he should be the finance minister. That's what he knows. That's his miktsua. That's how he was trained, and he does it well, and he saved us. We didn't have any of the problems the rest of the world had in 2008. None. But, power gets to everybody. And I think there's a general feeling that it's time for a change. It's very hard to find a candidate that's attractive. And I mean, even former General Gantz, who's running against him, is an attractive guy. But now people are saying, it's all we need are generals running the country? We haven't had such success with the generals over the years. So there's probably nobody strong enough to unseat him. If he gets indicted and if he gets convicted, that presents a different kind of problem. Because if he gets convicted, he really can't continue to serve.
Right.
But we'll see. There are other complaints which you see as a result of the Trumpism that's going on in the world. He's cozied up to an awful lot of world leaders that are not very nice people and don't have the best interests of Israel or Jews at heart.
But isn't it his opinion to cozy up to them is a security issue for Israel that
Yeah, that's the opinion. But if I were to write this blog, and I've not done it, only because I'm still in business, and I never know where something I write will end up. Some years ago, I wrote something in support of something Israel did. It found its way into the New Mexico Jewish Light. Somebody in New Mexico wrote a letter to the governor and said, this is the guy you've got representing New Mexico and Israel, and we had to do some damage control over it. You just never know.
I understand.
So I haven't really written much about it, but it's there's an issue as Jews. Where is the moral aspect of the politics? So it may be good for Israel to cozy up to these people, but there's a moral question involved, and that down deep, they're not the best people, they're not the best friends to have, even though it may be good, quote, for the security of Israel, but it may, change overnight. Then what do you do?
Could backfire in other ways.
Could be backfiring in other ways. It's not a simple situation. There are people who are critical, not so many, but I'm in that category, of his cozying up to the President of the United States in the way he does. The posters in Israel today, 12, 15-story high posters of Netanyahu shaking hands with Trump. I don't think that's a good thing. All right, I think that some of the things that have been done for Israel by the current American president will have a price to pay. And we don't know what the price is. And we're not going to be able to say no. I said in a seminar earlier today, somebody asked me for an example. And I said, look, we today are the largest center of medical cannabis development in the world, in Israel. We cannot export to the United States because the President of the United States said to the Prime Minister of Israel, you won't do this. And the Prime Minister of Israel cannot say no.
Right.
All right? Because there are too many things that he's done for Israel. And so I worry about buying things where you don't know what they're going to cost. And this will cost us more.
I understand.
There are bills yet to be paid.
So you've been there for 35 years.
I have.
Let's go on the other side of things. What are the positive things as you, as an author and a commentator? What are the positive things that are going to continue to make Israel the great state that it is, the great country?
So I think you have to look at two things. First off, you have to sort of delineate what the positive things are that are,
Right.
and some of the statistics are mind-boggling. 60% of the world's investment in cyber tech development is in Israel today.
60% of the world.
Of the world's. You're talking about a little country. For the state of Delaware that we represent, Israel is the largest source of foreign franchise tax income for the state of Delaware. We're 9 million people. Nothing. Okay? Nothing.
The size of New Jersey, right? The size, about the size of New Jersey.
And our economy is growing still at 3.5% a year. We didn't have any downside to the 2008 business. Unemployment is under 4%, And that's a fake figure because it's really lower, since a significant portion of the population by decision doesn't work. And so therefore the real number is lower. Anybody who wants a job today in Israel can get one, not necessarily in what they want to do, but they can get it. Our GDP is close to $40,000 per capita, is close to $40,000 a year, which is up with the highest levels of OECD countries. The country is after America, is the number 2 center of technological development in the world. At any given moment, there are 3,500 to 4,000 tech startups operating in the country. So all of that's the good stuff, but there are threats to the continued development. One of the biggest threats, actually, is something not a lot of people talk about here, and that is we have a shortage of technically trained people coming along because there are not enough people studying in Israel, studying tech subjects. So now some of the universities are saying, let's expand, let's get a bit more international and bring people in from other countries, which is also good for the country to study and then, bolster those numbers. We do have a poverty issue. You don't see people sleeping on the streets. You don't see people washing windshields to get a buck. And that's only because we were a socialist country up until 1986. And so there's a huge safety net. We don't have the health industry problems that you have in America.
Kupat Cholim and the
everything
national health.
Yeah, everything is controlled. I had some spinal surgery 7 years ago. If I had to pay for it out of my pocket, it would have been about $8,000 for everything. Surgeon, anesthesiologist, hospital, whole business. I didn't pay anything. But even if I had to, that number is a drop in the bucket.
Here it would have been $40,000, $50,000
it's a drop in the bucket.
Minimum.
I got something in my eye a few years ago here, and I went to an eye doctor, and I know it's going to cost me $100 for the exam. I had scratched the eyeball, and he gives me a prescription for drops. And I go to CVS, and the guy says, "You have insurance?" I said, "No, and not here." And so he said, "We'll have to charge you the full price." It was $135 for that little vial of drops. And then I went back to Israel, and I talked to the pharmacist, and he says, "Give me the generic name," which I did. And he said, "Sherwin, it's 15 shekels. All right? $6, less than $6 without insurance. If you had insurance, it's $1.50. Okay?
Unbelievable.
So, people have, we pay 125% tax on the purchase of a car, but everybody's driving cars. We have two. Okay? You pay $8 a gallon for gas, now it's about $7. Nobody stops driving. Nobody stops driving. So the economy moves well. Tel Aviv is probably among the world's 5 top cities in terms of life and progress and activity and economic development. Even the Paris Center for Peace, which was initially designed to encourage interface between the Arab and Israeli communities, today it's a center to show off Israeli innovation. And you go there, it's like one of the Museum of Science and Industry. I was there last month on a tour. Unbelievable, the stuff is going on. We have a company, Mobileye, everybody knows about, bought out, Intel bought them out. It gives you the ability to drive and know how far the cars are. So the inventors of Mobileye now have another company called Orcam. And Orcam will give you an opportunity to see if you've got 80% or less of your vision lost. So up to that level of 80% loss of vision, they have glasses that will now enable that person to see. Okay?
See normally.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. All right? And the Chinese and the Germans are all over the company, looking to get involved. The Hong Kong people have been there every time they come in.
Wow.
All right? And these are the same inventors who invented Mobileye. All right? So, I said in an earlier presentation today, there are things that exist in Israel, there's a series of things that are unique to that country and allows all of this to happen. And they are very simply a highly trained, highly educated workforce, an army that produces technically trained people. All right, the cyber tech industry is all former military, and a society that there's no onus on failure. It's not like Asia, where if you fail, you're marked for life. In Israel, every success story you talk about, that person has probably failed 4 times before they got there.
Wow.
And nobody cares.
Wow. And one of the things that I love about the APEC policy conference that I attend every year in Washington for the last 8 years or so is that they bring in a lot of the new technology. One of them that sticks out in my head, a lot of them do, by the way, the drip irrigation to save water. It's an amazing thing. But the recycling of sewage water and making it completely drinkable and clean.
We recycle
90%.
of our brackish water, and we're number 1 in the world, and number 2, which is Spain, about 48%. All right, it's just, and everybody could do it.
It's really unbelievable, and then being able to take ocean water, of course, and make it drinkable as well, desalinating it and making it clean and clear. But the other thing that always sticks out to me is the man who invented the suit that a person who's a paraplegic can get up and walk again. It's just
the exoskeleton.
The exoskeleton. It's
amazing.
One of the most amazing things I've ever seen Israeli developed. And so these things that they bring into for the APEC conference to show us Israel, they call it the Israel Innovation Sessions. They're unbelievable.
Yeah, there was a young man who got married about 6 weeks ago who was a paraplegic. And he stood up at his wedding under the chuppah.
Wow.
And he stood up using that mechanism. And the smile on his face was, you just had to capture it.
It's unbelievable.
Okay,
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. There's somebody, a former senior vice president of Johnson & Johnson made a statement a few years ago that there's somebody in Israel working on every one of the world's insoluble problems. And it's true. They may be in a 2-bedroom apartment, a 3rd floor walk-up in Ramat Gan, but they're there.
Wow.
They're there. And somebody, what I say to people here all the time, to companies, there's probably somebody in your organization that's worried that you're going to need a certain technology 3 years from now in order to stay competitive, and you don't have it. Somebody in Israel is working on that technology.
Wow. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch one more subject as we wind down, and that is the fear of terrorism. The fear of terrorism. Hamas, Hezbollah, the North right now, which is probably the biggest fear. I think that Hamas in Gaza and so on, I think that they are certainly something to worry about, but I don't think that they're a long-term fear for Israel, whereas the North and Iran being in Lebanon and being in Syria, that those things are a fear or at least a worry. How do you feel as an Israeli citizen? How safe do you feel in the long term? And do you think that Netanyahu and his government are really on top of this, even though we don't hear it and see it?
Look, first of all, I guess if I really feared it dramatically, I wouldn't be living there.
Right.
It's not something you think about every day. We are in, I would say, at much higher risk today than we've probably been in the last 25 years. The number of rockets pointed at us from the north is beyond what you could count. And chas v'chalila, God forbid, we get into another war, it's not going to be a clean war. We're not going to walk away with no injuries and what have you. Is the government doing what they can to prepare for that? Some people analyze it and say they're not. Some people analyze it and say they are. Netanyahu has a clear commitment to keeping Iran out of the area, and we now seem to be attacking Syria regularly when we see something going on from the Iranian side. We continue to live in a bad neighborhood. The saving grace, hopefully, is that we built better relations with the other countries of the Arab world.
All right. Well,
Not a
listen,
comfortable
we're
feeling.
going to hope for the best
Yeah.
and pray for the best, and we know that
Hope for the
it's
best and pray for the worst.
Right. It's still an amazing country, and I want to thank
It
you
is.
for visiting America from this country to be on the show today.
Pleasure.
Sherwin Pomerantz, much success in your career, much success with your blogs and spreading the word.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remember, you can check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web. If you want to email Sherwin Pomerantz or us, you can email us at info@tvrabbi.com. I will forward it to him, and I know he'll get back to you. Hope to see you all next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
On the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.